sitting up here and all these other people are over there. What is this?
Well, there's an old saying that goes, the closest distance between two hearts is a story. We've been telling stories together, and that's why we're here, to listen, to tell our stories, to bear witness.
Okay, if you could just do a brief overview as to who you are and how you came and what you're trying to do, what you're trying to do. I think that would help all of us.
Sure, Loretta. So I'm here to represent a few of the people who were in the room in our workshops. So Cullen from ETC and Ashley made us do some crazy games. I'm from Challenging Racism, and that organization works to facilitate respectful conversations about race. And we thought it would be useful to bring these two things together so that we can talk about difficult things respectfully and bravely, and so that we can listen to each other. It's these kinds of conversations that change us. And we are here today to present some of what came out of those conversations.
That just feels so formal. Can we imagine if I'm having all of you over for lunch? You're going to come over with food, and we'll talk about our experiences with racism.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, you know I gotta speak.
Oh yeah. And Terry, welcome to my lunch. When I bring up racism, what comes to your mind?
Well, during the civil rights movement, it was a bitter conflict. I remember when my sister first became Miss Black America in Miss Black District of Columbia. She did beat up in that swing, she said. My mom had died when I was 9 years old. My father was very protective because he had 7 girls. And 6 boys. Down. Anyway, he had to be in charge of the boys. So at the same time, we had the civil rights movement happening. My mom had died. My sister had met a white gentleman. His name was Alden. He was a part of what you would call, I guess, the revolutionary movement, because he was against segregation. He was against discrimination. That's where Al fit in all this. My father was busy. He had 3 jobs. You know, he had 9 kids to take care of them, so he was working his behind off. So he couldn't exactly protect us as he should have been able to, but in his mind, so when he had to protect, he went all gun up, all the way, no in-betweens. So, but a lot of times, he couldn't take us out anywhere we didn't go to places like other people went. There was a lot of us. Well, this white gentleman, Al, came into our world. He would take us to the zoo, and he would take us other places. My father didn't know nothing about this. Okay, but they also had a band. My sister, she was, I guess y'all would call it a black sheep, some would call it a white sheep. But anyway, she always went against the grain. You know, she never accepted the norm had to be the norm. So they developed a band. The band was doing really great. And they were playing all up in New York and everything. And one time she decided to get real cute, and Al bought her a dress. They were the paper dresses, you know. Dick Clark was around, everybody was shimmy, cocoa pop, all of that stuff. Well, she had one of them dresses, and Dad was gone quite a bit, so they decided that we were going to have the band in the backyard, which was great, because that made us look real good, all 9 of us, you know. We had a band in the backyard. All of them was white except my sister. You know, this was some good shit on Kipper Road, I'm just saying. You know, so anyway, this is one of them times my daddy decided to backtrack. I don't know, our parents know that. But he backtracked and he came home early. And I'll never forget it. My sister was shimmy, cocoa pop, shimmy. And that dress was just going, shimmy, shimmy, cocoa pop. My daddy walked up to the band and saw all these white people. And the dress that my sister had on, and he ripped it off of her. That's exactly what everybody else did. We couldn't say nothing. Everybody just went off. Then Al decided he wanted to explain it to my dad, which wasn't a good look. So anyway, my sister said, go home. And that was the end of that part of that part. But then at the same time, she had become a little more of a part of the revolutionary movement of the Black Panther. And she was friends with Angela Davis, stuff like that. So when it came time for her to give her crown back, she had cut her hair bald. She cut all her hair off. When it came time for her to pass the crown over, they told her unless she wore a wig, she wouldn't be allowed to pass that crown to the next Miss Black America. Well, my sister chose to say that I am Miss Black America. You know, so she wasn't allowed to give the crown over to her, to that situation. I don't know where I'm at on this paper, but y'all got the story.
Page 3.
Thank you. Okay, where we at?
Paragraph 3.
Cassandra, that's you.
You still on page 1, what's up? I'm still on 3. Oh, wow, you see it right. Okay. Well, there was a time when our movie theaters were not integrated in Arlington. So on Saturdays, my father would either have to take us downtown DC, and at that time there were like 4 theaters in DC that Black people could go to. And I'm thinking we could also go to one in Alexandria, but I'm not sure.
I remember that.
The Colored Theater, we called it. And some days, they would have Colored Day at the theaters. There were certain days we could go, and then if we did go, we had to sit in the balcony, if the theater had a balcony.
Was it the Bird Theater?
Yeah, I think, well,
On King Street.
yes, or was it on Queen Street? It was Queen Street? Okay, yeah, I got it. You're right. I was probably maybe 10, 11, 12, and it was organized for us to walk from Green Valley in Arlington all the way up Glebe Road to the Buckingham Theater, which now is a post office. And the entire community walked there to enforce integration. So it took some time, but I can remember when we couldn't go to a restaurant and sit down. But we could always get window service. And if we did go somewhere to sit down, it's what we call a hole in the wall, mostly standing room only. And it wasn't until August, maybe in the 70s or early 70s, when we knew and we understood what the law was, okay? And we finally, you know, were able to go in and feel comfortable sitting down.
That was a tough time.
68 was when I started my first job, and that was when they were drafting us. At the same time, if you were 18 years old, you were drafted. And luckily, I became one of the few people not drafted. They had a lottery system. I had the highest number, so I knew I wasn't going to get drafted. But all my brothers were drafted, except for me. But it was a negative for me, because I couldn't get a job. Before they had the draft, if you were 18, you were taken out of school and sent to the military. You couldn't get a job, you couldn't stay in school, you just left. You were isolated. Couldn't do anything. But once they gave you the lottery number, at least you could have your livelihood. It was tough times. But we understood the situation. Nobody was confused, everybody abided by it. The issue is without family structure. And I had a very good family.
Okay, new topic.
Well, even though this is my lunch, I'll allow it.
Okay, this is the question I've been asking myself, for real, y'all. Because it got me going bonkers. And this is true, it does, it has me going bonkers. We stated it one time in group, and this conversation never went anywhere. So for about 3 days, it was driving me crazy. It almost made me not want to come to the workshop, but I understood something off of that. I understood that in opening up these things, it brings some raw stuff. It does, it brings some raw stuff. So I just say that to say that I hope when we're giving y'all this, know that we don't just give it to you. We take whatever you give us back, and we take it with us too. Okay, that being said, all right, it was blowing my mind. All these levels of brown, and the work I have to figure out for myself is, what is it? What is that, this separation stuff? I try to look at it logically. I'm not one who dives in the hate in any way, shape, form, or fashion, but I am quite the curious George. I wonder what it is that Spanish people, or Bolivian people, or Mexican people, what you're told about us. Because being Black Americans here, we already know most of our story don't get told. You see what I'm saying? So I'm trying to wonder really a lot, with a lot of curiosities. What stories do you all hear about us? Because in some of my encounters with the Spanish, even if I'm open-armed, that wall is like, blah, you know, it's gotta be something in there, and I don't get it, because you can't just come someplace and not know people and just not like them. And this did come from one little thing that happened in my life. When I was living at the Berkeley, I went to the Giant. I was walking in the Giant, just gazing. There was a Spanish woman, she had her son and her daughter. The baby touched the jerkies, and he said, "Mama, get this." And the woman said, "No, we don't get jerky, because that's what niggas eat." Ooh, I don't even know what that made me feel, even to this day. I didn't feel like coming back at her to say, "Nah, for real, bitch, I'm getting tacos." Because I was really getting tacos. But it stung me like a knife. And now all these browns, what the hell? I don't get it. So I just have to ask myself, what do they tell y'all? Where does this come from?
Well, you mentioned something important. We are Spanish, yes, but we are totally different. The Mexicans, the Colombians, the Bolivians, we speak the same language, but I need to be careful when I talk to them, the other Spanish people. Because for me, sometimes the word that is correct for the others is no, it is not correct. And it's like, oh my God, and how can I speak with the others? Because I understand now, I need to say, for me, this word means something. Is the same for you? Because one word is good for me, but for others will be offended. Sometimes this kind of difference can result in the loss of a friend, because some people never understand that the meaning is different. I never forget my boss's wife. She was walking down the street with her daughter, and someone as a compliment told her how pretty she is. Que mona tan linda. She came to the office furiously because her daughter was offended because someone called her monkey. And it was very difficult to explain to her that the meaning was different. And here we have some problems. Sometimes the people talk about discrimination, and I think it's like we discriminate against ourselves. One thing I notice here is the people are very afraid about the situation here. Not all the time, they are here legally, and the people are so afraid about what will happen with them, so they prefer to close themselves. Because if not, I am at risk. And sometimes I know now from all my experiences is that I'm afraid to be open to new people. Sometimes I think, oh, my English is not good, and I don't feel comfortable with my English, and I think this is the barrier, but the barrier is my barrier. It's not the other's barrier, and it's crazy to understand this.
You said something interesting, and I don't like to call people who speak the Spanish language Spanish people. What binds is your language. You all speak, but you are Hispanic to Americans. You do differentiate between, you know, depending on what country you come from. Now, what I've learned is those who speak Spanish and don't come from Spain, they're not Spaniards. They really don't like the Spanish people, but that's another subject. So I like to, you know, I want to know, are you from Colombia? Are you from El Salvador? Are you from Guatemala? You know the country that you come from and that you do speak Spanish. And yes, there is a big difference. An example, I went to a store once and, you know, if you give a check, they'll run your check through and they'll give you a, you know, give your check back. So I had the receipt. So I don't want to misplace it. So I'm going to the lady's Hispanic. May I have a stapler, please? Do you have a stapler? She's looking at me like, what is that? And I said, you know, the thing. She says, oh, you mean a grappler? I understand it. It grabs the paper. That's something that I learned. I took 7 years of French in school. Why I did it, I don't know. I only know enough Spanish to be polite.
Yeah.
Okay. But I like what both of you just said, and I'm trying to see if it's you. Because what I try to always do is see if it's me. I didn't know her, and I don't know him, and I would still feel more comfortable with them because of the fact that we look alike. We sound alike. So it's not always because we dislike, it's who you feel comfortable with, and sometimes it can be mistaken for racism.
Yeah, it's a form of bias. But where do those biases come from?
The parents, comes from the parents.
The news?
No, you already gathered most of those by the time you're grown. I'm 100% set on parents, okay? They lay everything out for us. They set us up, they teach us, you know? Unfortunately, that's where we're falling now. Parents aren't stepping up. A lot of parents are letting their kids down and forcing them to live their life without any guidance, any instruction, okay? And they should.
When I was growing up, there was no such thing.
That's what I'm saying.
I had no structure when it came to racism. They didn't tell me anything. I didn't know people were judging me based on my color because no one ever told me. When I was in elementary school, I remember going to school one day on the bus, and we were sitting on the front of the bus, and this older white lady got on and walked past where my friends and I were sitting and laughing, and she told the bus driver she needed a seat. Well, there were plenty of seats on the bus. So we thought she just didn't see because she was old, so we told her, we pointed out there's a seat here, there's a seat there, there's a seat there. So she went back to the bus driver and said, and the bus driver said, well, when do y'all give this lady a seat? So we pointed out again, there were plenty of seats. And he said he wasn't going to move the bus until one of us moved. So we started talking and laughing again. Because if we were late from school, we could tell the truth. The bus driver made us late. Finally, some of the people on the bus got angry and said, I need to go to work. I'm going to be late. And the bus driver finally said, ma'am, would you find a seat, please? But she was like, ah. She sat down very indignant. I didn't understand that until I was a teenager, that she was being racist. But my parents and my friends did understand because their parents or my friends' parents would ride the bus with us for the next month. And after that time, the bus driver treated us differently. I was like the 4th or 5th grade when it happened. I didn't understand until I was over it, and I'm glad I didn't. I would have been scared to death if they told me I needed to be afraid.
You don't think it would have been better to know?
No. I went to Catholic school and everybody in the school was black. The nuns were black. The students were black. My life was black. There used to be a liquor store on Walter Reed Drive where the theater is now. There was a liquor store next to it. And my sister and I were walking up Columbia Pike, and this guy came out of the liquor store. He had on a pair of dungarees, no shirt on, no shoes. His hair was long and stringy, and he was coming out of the liquor store. And he said, "Get out of my way, niggers." Well, no one had ever called me nigger before, so I didn't know what that meant, but I knew the way he said it, it wasn't good. So we said to him, "Who are you calling names? You need to go home, take a bath, wash your hair, and stand on that dirty car." You know? And we burst out laughing because we thought it was hilarious. I think he got scared because he started running and jumped in the car, and they pulled off like bats out of hell. You know, I don't think he was used to people talking back to him, you know, so. And it wasn't until the civil rights movement started that all this stuff came out that I had no idea what was going on. It was going on all around me, but I wasn't aware of it because I'd never been told. And so I had no reason to be afraid. And I'm glad they didn't tell me because I would have been afraid I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of stuff because of fear. But I learned, but not because someone was trying to hurt me, because we learned about it and what was happening in the South. Racism here was a lot more subtle. I just thought some white folks were strange, that's all. I thought their actions were strange, but no one ever told me, so I went over my head.
I'll drink to that. People are strange. Okay, but we're at Betty's lunch, remember?
I remember last Saturday, I went to the theater, and the story is about English, what happens with the immigrants in different situations, trying to understand others, trying to learn English, and needing to change some customs or traditions. And they talk about Iranian people, and for them, it was difficult to establish in any place because they feel like, I don't belong here, and I don't belong in my country. And one of the things they mentioned is about the names, because sometimes when we are here, we need to change our names because for Americans, it's difficult to pronounce. I remember when I studied English, one of the books mentioned that Chinese people changed their names to one from here. I remember when I finished at the theater, I remembered my sister lived here 20 years ago, and for her it was difficult because her name is Patricia. And here, when she tried to explain the name, she decided to change the name to Patricia, and for me too. There are many barriers, many things we need to learn together.
I know that immigrants come to America with a belief and a desire. They don't come with feelings about a particular group. They just want to come and build a life and build a family, just like you do and just like you do. We all want the same thing, and the issue is this is a tough society. Even though they say this is the land of the free, this is a tough place to build because we have other pressures that are preventing us from doing and living the way we want to live. But immigration in this country is a buzzword.
That's how Trump won his whole presidency. That's how Trump won his whole presidency when he started talking about it so hard. He just rode that train until the wheels fell off.
We have a stigma. Everybody thinks that we're drug dealers, and it's not true. And you meet someone for the first time, and you mention you're from Colombia, and they say, oh, okay. My brother studied in Spain, and he had to pass through all the controls in the airport and with the police because he was Colombian. I was denied my visa twice because I went to visit my brother in Barcelona. I worked, I had my money. I was supposed to be eligible for a visa, but they denied my visa for the second time because I had gone to Europe. And they asked, why did you go to Europe? So the consul was supposing I had taken drugs.
That's scary because you didn't know if you were going to be able to leave there or not.
Okay. I want to talk about another place we see problems, like the educational system. They told my brother in 1969 he had a white counselor. The white counselor told him he didn't need to go to college. He needed to find a job at Firestone. My brother came home and he was upset. He told my father, I wanted to go to school, I wanted to go to the University of Southern Florida. What did the counselor say? Counselor told me no, to go get a job at Firestone. So the counselors at that time, they weren't encouraging people of color to go on. They were telling them to go get a job. But my brother went to college.
You get back up and you keep trying.
The principal kept calling home saying that my brother Leslie was being disruptive in class. And my father needs to come and get him. And it was always around lunchtime. So my father kept taking off work to come and get him, and my father was already mad. He was like, I have to take off work. I have to come get you because you're fighting. What are you fighting for? You know you're going to get a whooping when you get home. That was the given. And I was like, Leslie, why are you fighting all the time? And he wouldn't share it with anyone until one day my father said, if I have to come back up here one more time to this school because of you, I'm going to lose my job. And he said, I'm fighting every day because they're calling me nigger. And when my father heard that he said that, and you never said anything, and he said, I never said anything to you, Dad, but they're calling me a nigger here in Fairfax every single day at lunchtime, and that's why I'm fighting. So my father went into the office, told the principal what was going on, and he asked, where are the kids who were fighting him? You just told me to come get Leslie, but where are the individuals who were fighting him? And what are you doing to them? And the principal said, well, they said Leslie started it. So automatically Leslie got in trouble, but he never even found out what happened because Leslie was black, so the principal assumed that he started it. But he wasn't a bad kid, neither one of us was. And when my dad found out Leslie never got any more beatings about it, and my father said, if you call me again about my son, you better make sure you have dealt with those kids that called him nigger. And so the principal didn't call him anymore. But my parents transferred us to Wakefield in Arlington.
Thank God I transferred to school in DC. Arlington, we were too busy segregating each other and making the job real hard. When I went to school in Fairfax, all we heard about was Dick, Sally, and Jane. Lord have mercy.
Oh, we heard about them in Arlington too. Those were the stupidest kids, right?
One had a blue house, one had a white house. I started with Dick and Jane in a little greenhouse. And I say with no disrespect, but you know how you smile off when I said that? Y'all laughed. You should have felt what I felt like. I'll never forget how we talked about that in school. We didn't understand a damn thing in that green book. That green and white book, I still hate it to this day. As God is my witness, this ain't even on the paper. I still hate that book to this day.
I hate it too, but probably for different reasons. But yeah.
I'll never forget that book.
I went to school in Manassas. We were kind of mixed up, so I got along. That's what I can say. People say they don't see color. I can't say I didn't do that, but I can say I don't judge you by your color. I judge a person by their character. I got to Manassas, like I said, and I went to a school. The school was called Jenny Bean.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all know it. It was junior high, but now they've made it just a school for small kids. I moved from Manassas with my grandparents to DC. Went to 3 different junior high schools before I went to Whitman Senior High School. Now at Whitman, there was only 2 groups, white and majority black. I wanted to go back to Manassas. The problem was the kids. I got bullied every day, every single day. Kids were like, oh, I'll help you. They take my book bag, get to the top of the stairs, and drop it. I say, oh, well, guess I'll be late for class, okay. I went through a lot, going to high school and being bullied by my own. Now, when I say by my own, I mean other black kids. But I was raised in a family where you don't let people steal your joy. You still got to get up and do what you got to do. But when I was in Manassas with my grandparents, I literally had to help to get back up on my feet. They told my mother and grandparents it would take me 2 or 3 years to walk again. When my grandfather heard that, he went to the school to talk to the principal. He asked the principal, could you please help my daughter get up on her feet every day for 5 to 10 minutes? Let it get longer, that she can get up out of the wheelchair. I was in a wheelchair with a cast up to my waist, down to my right toe. By the end of the school year, by June, I was walking because I literally had help from the students. They come to my classroom at lunchtime or in their free time and ask, can I help?
My mother was a teacher. She taught for 30 years in DC public schools. And she was my mentor because out of all the 7 kids, she and I would sit down and we had a unique way of communicating. We argued with each other and we loved each other, and I love that. To this day, because it taught me how to communicate with other people and how not to bring anger to a conversation, but how to get your point across. So that is why I'm so big on family. That's where you learn these skills. From your mother, your father, your sister, your brothers. That's where you get your biases. How you learn what's right and what's wrong. You gather information, and that is the best resource for you. That's where the history is.
Now, when I was growing up, Drew Elementary at the time was predominantly black. We were segregated in Arlington. Black kids went to a black school, white kids went to a white school. And so after the 6th grade, you had the opportunity to go to a junior high school. Now, junior high schools were integrated, and so I'm in the 7th grade. I'm sitting there, I'm in the choir, drama class, and I'm excited because that's what I wanted to do. And I finally get to be in the class that I'm thinking about for my career. And there was a white young lady that was sitting beside me, and we were great friends. We laughed, she laughed, we were all excited about being in class together, and we did things together. Her name was Marjorie. I'll never forget it. And we were great friends, great friends. And so one day she says, well, why don't you come over to my house after school, because we can sit down and go over the lines. We had a little skit we had to do, so I said, okay. So I asked my mother if I could go over to her house. Now, if you know anything about Arlington, I lived in South Arlington, an area called Green Valley. She lived up by where the Thomas Jefferson is up on 2nd Street, okay? Remember that. Now, over in that little neighborhood over there, I was so excited about going over to her house. I asked my mom if I could go. She said it was okay. Marjorie's excited. Marjorie had even told her mother. But Marjorie's mother had never seen me. So when we got to the door, she goes in, she knocks on the door, and when we go in, I said, hello, Miss Clark. She looked at me like I was bad news. I looked at her like, what had I done? So she told me to just wait right there, right in the foyer. I didn't get past the foyer. She said, can I get your mom's phone number? And so I said, sure, you can get my mom's number. She said, it's okay. She said, I could come. I'll give you the number. You can call her. And I stood there in the foyer, and she said, Marjorie, run up and change your clothes. She went to change her clothes, and she called my mother. In about 5 or 10 minutes, my mother and father were at her house. And I'm standing there like, and my mother knocked on the door, and she opened, and she said, I'm Mrs. Carter. And she said, I'm Mrs. Clark, here's your daughter. And so I'm looking at my mom like, I didn't do anything wrong. I knew I was going to get in trouble. I knew I must have done something wrong because she's here and she's going to get me. So I said, Mom, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. She said, come on with me. And I said, but I didn't do anything wrong. And I was sitting in the back seat of the car and I was in tears because I didn't do anything wrong. I asked you and you said yes. I did everything I was supposed to do. My mother and father didn't open their mouths. We got in the house and I went straight to my room. My mother came in behind me and I just knew I was going to get punished or a whooping or something. I was like, I must have done something wrong. And she made me pull up my sleeve and she said, the reason she doesn't like you is because of the color of your skin. And that was the first example of racism that I ever seen in my life. And as a kid, it broke me. Because I'm like, me and this girl had things in common. We were friends. And I hadn't done anything wrong. It still hurts to this day. And for the world to judge you just because of the color of your skin, that lady didn't even get to know me. She didn't know how exciting I am. I'm a great kid, never got in trouble. All she saw was this. And she judged me based on this. And when we went back to school the next day, what was even worse was the fact that she sat away from me. And you know why? Because her mother told her to. And this was not something that she felt, this was something that was told to her. So you see, racism is taught. She didn't feel that way at all. We had the best of fun. We were the best of friends. I mean, laughing, joking, exchanging notes. Just laughing, and today it makes me mad. Even when people judge you before they even know you, you haven't opened your mouth. I don't like her, I don't like him.
A few weeks ago, someone brought up that this was the first time there were going to be 2 African-American quarterbacks playing in the Super Bowl. And someone asked, well, why is that a big deal? And the conversation was interesting because someone came back and said, you can't look at that as a racist statement because it really isn't. It's highlighting the fact that we've never had an opportunity to participate at this level. Never got that opportunity at this position. African-Americans were prohibited from performing in that position. It's not really about racism. It's about the lack of opportunities. And do we really need to get into a conversation about why people were denied this opportunity? I think it's a terrific thing we've risen to that level.
It is, but are you saying that the word racism kind of gets in the way of talking about things that we ought to talk about? Is that what you're saying?
I just believe in the human spirit, that we are better than that as a people. And we are more intelligent enough to overcome these things. In other words, one of the things I've done in my life is try to never put that as a stumbling block in front of me. You know what I mean? In other words, I think I've been fairly successful in my life. These things haven't prevented me from succeeding in what I wanted to do, and I don't see that as racism as preventing me from doing it. I see it as an economic and cultural issues that people have trouble dealing with. You have me thinking.
Yeah, and I think maybe that word can be a stumbling block for people and an impediment to moving forward at times.
Yeah, like what she was sharing about being left-handed, but then working hard to learn to use her right hand because it gave her too many problems. You see, to me, that's the human spirit. That's what we do as humans. We don't let these stumbling blocks prevent us from being successful. We figure out ways around it, and we are intelligent enough to do it. That's the kind of message that I want to get out. We learn how to overcome these issues.
I thank God that I didn't stay stuck. That I didn't close myself off to every white person or stereotype them and say all white people are bad. I have a lot of friends of all different nationalities, and that's how I want it. I don't want to live in a neighborhood that's all one type of person. I like diversity. I'm just thankful I didn't let that one story mess my life up or cause me to be bitter or nasty to another race. I thank God for that.
I'm a person of change. I have this habit, and I can't figure out why, but I have an 8-year cycle. And I feel very comfortable making drastic changes.
Like what kind of changes?
Well, coming out of high school, I couldn't read. I'm not kidding. I couldn't read. I know that sounds crazy because all my sisters went to college, and one of my sisters is a linguist. She knows 8 languages, and she travels the world with the State Department as an interpreter. I couldn't even read a book, but I could outperform everyone in math class. But in English class, I was the worst student, so I barely made it out of high school. I went through my next 8-year cycle, and something says, okay, I can fix this. And one thing that I felt was my secret was that I had this addictive personality. I can become addicted to anything. And I realized that's actually a pretty good skill. So what I did was I taught myself how to read. And I taught myself so well that I became the Chief Technology Officer in Washington, D.C. for the Department of Health. And I would write all those proposals and all the business plans for the Department of Health. And I would come home at midnight, go to sleep, wake up at 2 in the morning and write a full proposal before 8. And I still didn't go to college. So every 8 years I change my profession and I do different things. Completely different things, and I do it without any structure. I just teach myself how to do it, and I do it. And when I get tired after I run that cycle, I can just change it. My whole career's been like that. I think you can teach yourself almost anything, and I think that the fact that I have a very logical mind helped me see what my faults were and what I needed to correct, and how to go about correcting those things. You can do a lot of things just by making it happen and doing it. Just by doing it over and over again until you do it without thinking. I think that's the secret.
Can I ask you a question? Did your mama know you couldn't read?
Yes and no. Yes and no.
I bet that was a little hard.
Mm-hmm. Of all the kids we had, I was the odd one. Everyone was doing things the same, and I was always the one doing something different. The reason was I was enjoying myself, and I didn't take anything seriously. My French teacher was actually my cousin, and she failed me. She put me in front of the class and gave me the hardest time, but I just enjoyed my life. And I suspect that's why I can get through life. I've always been able to communicate with people, and I think that is the biggest asset I have as communicator. I was always treated very well, I never had a problem with anybody, and I had 3 big brothers that helped. But life was actually pretty good.
I have a question for the group. Is there an object, something that you can hold, something that you have, that kind of defines who you are, that shows us who you are?
I have a small board. It belonged to my father. My father passed away 30 years ago, last January. He passed when he was 43 years old, so young, and he has larynx cancer, and for the last years it was very, very hard because every surgery cut off a part of his body, and in the last 3 years he lost his vocal cords. But he learned to speak with his esophagus. He no longer breathed through his nose, but a tracheotomy, and he relearned to speak. But in the last days, the tumor grew, and he couldn't speak, so he asked me to buy a small board. And he used that to communicate with me. And I kept it with his last notes for a long time. And when I came to the U.S., this was the first thing I put in my bag. When I think of the hardest difficulties, it is to communicate. I thought that I had learned English, and when I worked in my country, I supposed that I spoke English, but when I came here, it was very hard for me. So I had to learn again, and it has been a resilience exercise for me. It's very hard. Everything that we have to live in life, you have to learn how to survive. I think that is the power for human beings. I had to learn when you lose someone that made you feel very protected. I had to learn how to survive. Because my father passed away and my mother came to this country, so I had to live with my two siblings when I was only 12 years old. I didn't understand why I cried all the time. I had to learn. I had to find something to help me. So every morning I use this cup. A friend gave it to me, and I love coffee. I love the coffee, and I go to church, and I can help people. I learn how to survive and how to defend myself and how to defend others. If in the system you cannot say something, but if I see somebody who is hurting you, I open my mouth. If I get in trouble, okay, but that's me. No matter what, my morning is a cup of coffee in this mug. With God, all things are possible.
Did you have a role model or someone to help you through?
Well, after that thing happened with your friend at school, I'm sure your mother continued to talk to you. And since you were sheltered and you were very introverted anyway, I guess it made you come to feel more introverted. And you've always had that lingering question, what did I do wrong? But I'm glad your mother told you that you didn't do anything wrong. And that as you go through life, you will see people that won't like you just because of the color of your skin. Has that helped you?
Everybody's connected in some way, shape, form, or fashion. You can take the essence from a tree and the dirt and expect it to grow. It's just not going to happen. I don't care what you do. You can use Miracle Grow, you can use the best compost, you can put fish heads in it. It's not going to grow unless you take everything that was put in it, in that dirt, and made that dirt be dirt. That's why we won't have peace on earth if we keep taking everything out of the story and everything out of the dirt.
Betty, is there anything that final thoughts you have before we go home? And wasn't this lunch delicious? What's a word or two that you would want to leave with us?
Oh, mine is understanding, courage,
Acceptance and empathy.
open.
Love.
Dang, y'all stole my words. I'll say persistence.
Nah. This is so expected. You can't end with something like hope. That's just too Jesse Jackson. You know what's a good word? Beginning. Just beginning.
Thank you all. Wasn't that wonderful? Yes. All right, now we're going to transition for a second. Turning it over to Dawn here, who is with Challenging Racism. Please, Dawn, feel free to just tell a little bit about what Challenging Racism does. And
Thank you. Alicia, come right on up. It is my joy to introduce you to the head of Challenging Racism's Board of Directors, Alicia Catley.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I have to say, I was also on the board of TTC for 6 years, so this is so close to my heart. Both the Devising Hope sort of structure, and then to be able to talk about challenging racism in that structure is just amazing. So Challenging Racism is a nonprofit that teaches people how to have difficult conversations about race. And it is a piece of what you've heard today is happens all the time in the classes that we provide. So I am just so excited to have you all here to see it, and I'm gonna let Dawn take it over.
Thank you, Alicia. Thanks for being here tonight. So as Alicia said, this experience has been a natural fit for Challenging Racism. We talk about changing the world one compassionate conversation at a time. I want to, before we go further, offer my thanks to Ashley and to Cullen, to the Arlington Housing Commission. Did I get that right? AHC. Thank you. And especially to the participants who told their stories. Let's have another round of applause. It takes a lot of bravery and vulnerability to be able to tell stories like this. And they are a gift entrusted to us. They are precious. And we learn from each other because of this opportunity to spend time sharing. In our work, we offer guidelines for these conversations because this isn't casual conversation, and this is not about thinking what you're going to say next. It is about listening deeply. It is about sharing from the heart, and you have heard that tonight. Even more important than speaking is the listening and bearing witness. As we design our workshops, we often move from systemic and structural racism to focus on individual racism and biases and where they come from and privilege and equity and how that works. But you can very easily see that the curriculum was shared in these stories, right? It was not a heavy lift to say, oh, did you make that connection? Did you hear what he shared, she shared? These were living examples of the concepts that we talk about. So it's been a privilege to do this work and share this space. I did want to open the floor up in case you might have some questions about what you heard, or some comments that you would like to make, or a story that you would like to share.
I'll break the ice.
Yeah.
I thought you all were wonderful, simply wonderful. I almost could not believe you weren't telling a story you had lived through. Like, you said something about 1964, and I'm like, no. But, otherwise you could have fooled me, because it was all so heartfelt and beautiful. And I was struck by so many things that you shared. They were so moving. And at one point, I believe you were talking about someone saying, oh, I don't see color. And we've all heard that a number of times. Usually, not to be stereotypical, from a well-meaning white person, right? I see right through that, but the truth is, we're humans, and we're attuned to noticing details. So in an attempt to deny our bias and our prejudice and say that we don't see color, it's actually a form of violence, because I want to see you for who you are, in all your nuances of personality and background and origin and accent. I want to take that in. I want to honor that. So I was just struck by that, how, you know, I don't know how you guys feel about that, and, you know, the reference to Martin Luther King and being judged on character rather than on skin color. I'm just rambling. I thought it was beautiful.
Well, you know, when you make the comment of, oh, I don't see color, it's like, you know, communication, if you're speaking to a white person and you may feel a little black, oh, no, my best friends are white. I see my best friends are black. Really? Well, guess what? You have a new one now. So, you know.
Yeah. And yes.
I was wondering if the cast could introduce themselves.
Oh, what a great idea. Mitchell, would you like to start?
Sure. I'll stand up. My name is Mitchell Alexander.
My name is Loretta Herbert, reside in Serrano.
My name is Gigi Camarado.
My name is Terry Clark. I stay in Serrano.
My name is Desire Lovey May. I am from Ohio, and I'm happy to be working here in the DMV with ETC.
My name is Cassandra Lucas, and I grew up in Arlington County, and I went to Wakefield, and you know, it was nice to see Terry again, just to give you a little background and connections in the community. I actually met Terry's family, which started with my father, and her father worked in the military together, and they both worked at Fort Belvoir. So at that time, after the Fair Housing Act was passed, Mr. Clark came, he bought a house in the neighborhood, and then he went and got my father, and we bought a house up the street. And when she was talking about her sister, which I guess her sister, well, there was so many of you all, you know. Anyway, her sister, who later became Miss Black America, at one time used to be the babysitter. When my mother and father would go out, her sister was the one that babysat them. And Terry and my sister were very, very good friends. And I mean, this was from the time of year, you know, and all the way through the years.
And her father, Mr. Ben, was one of the first black ambassadors to Africa.
Wow. Yeah. And my name is Dawn Kaiser, and like, I discovered friends in this group, generational cohorts, because I too grew up in Arlington, and went to Wakefield and to Yorktown. And so it's amazing to me that some of the struggles that we walked through together so many years ago are struggles that we still deal with. You know, structural issues in housing, in education, in healthcare, in transportation. And it seems to me that the more we talk together and bring these things up into the daylight, the better the possibility that we could maybe actually solve some of these things. So that 100 years from now, we're not fighting over the same things. I don't know. I believe that maybe we are a collection of creative, intelligent folks, compassionate, empathetic, and that in talking together and working together, we can change the world to a certain extent. You heard examples of structural racism in some of the stories. What examples of structural racism did you hear? What comes to mind? Yes.
The movie theaters.
The movie theaters, right? Access, right? What else?
College counselor that.
Right? Counselors in the education system. What else did you hear about? Say again? Neighborhoods, right, right. And segregation of neighborhoods, right? Yeah, yeah. It's possible that not all of us ran into those roadblocks, right? And one of the interesting things about structural racism is that it perpetuates itself and sometimes can be hard to see if you don't run into it. And you have borne witness to stories of people who had to deal with those barriers tonight, right? In talking about how individuals interact in communities and in interactions with each other, we had an opportunity to talk about privilege and about bias and about equity. Did you hear any examples? What did you hear tonight about some of those issues? Yeah.
Marjorie's mother.
Right, yeah, clear example, right? Yeah. What else? I've been doing some training, and this is kind of top of mind. We are finding in studies about neuroscience now that if you have a brain, you have bias. It's just the way we're wired as humans, you know? It is a way that humans make sense of the world around them. And human beings are very good at organizing, categorizing, and making up stories to kind of fill in the blanks. What we're not very good at is accuracy in the stories that we make up, right? And oh my goodness, does that cause problems, right? So if you're human, you deal with bias, you deal with blind spots. We all have them. But there are ways to counteract that intentionally, right? Taking a breath. Yes?
I want to speak to what you were saying into the issue about colorblindness. I grew up in the segregated South.
Yeah?
Of course, everything was segregated back in the 40s and 50s and the 60s. Our schools were closed. But in the 70s, I lived through the time where we changed it, we, white Southerners, well, I was Northern, I'd already moved out of the South. We white Northerners were working hard to change our language. So we moved from Negro to Black. That was in the 70s, I think. And there was a lot of emphasis on color blindness is positive. Blacks were telling us it was positive. There was no, we should not be thinking in terms of color difference. By the 90s, 80s to 90s, it had changed again, and of course, color matters. And I'm just struck as I was listening to y'all who are just wonderful, all of you, of how the white, liberal people who attempted to make some changes go back and forth and trying to figure out what this is and what is the best way of addressing something that we only, I don't know how you finish the sentence.
Yeah, but let's stop and take a breath for a second. And I hear what you're saying, and I heard those same messages, a lot of them. But if I sit here and I take a breath and I'm quiet in myself and I say, color blindness, yeah, that could work. Does that really make any sense?
No.
Because it's not what I see. It's not what I experience.
I'll be looking for a Care Bear.
You looking for what?
A Care Bear.
Yeah.
You know, it's something when you don't know the Care Bear.
So,
What?
you can talk after. So did that make any sense to any of you? It doesn't make sense to Terry. It, you know, and we were wrong about that, weren't we? Yeah.
But I think at the same time, and I can only talk from my experience, the African Americans around me were participating in finding the right language also.
And language is fluid.
And, you know, we went from the words I won't use to Negro to colored to Black to African American. And not everybody who is of color liked the changes of, I mean, it was always a time of confusion for me.
How do you think I feel? Now we got 14 Browns. I'm like, Lord, what am I? I mean, it's kind of funny to laugh at, but when I look at myself, I really want to know, what the hell are y'all calling me now? You know, I know all the names you're talking about. Afro-American, that's the only one you left out.
Well, Afro is a hairstyle. Okay.
No, but
I
yeah,
know what you're saying,
But
but for so long, that's what we would call Afro-American. Afro wasn't called. Go on, listen, let's see your point.
But so I really don't know. That's where I'm stuck at. I don't know. I was doing a recertification on something yesterday. I think my insurance or something. And the lady said, "Would you like to state your color?" And I said, "No." I want to tell her I don't know what the hell I am anymore.
Well, they have a box, check other.
No, but it's more than that in me. It's more than that inside of me.
I understand.
This is giving me something, and I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't mind the new idea of all of it, but can you put it in some kind of perspective and just stop shouting things at me? That's what it feels like. It feels like you're shouting things at me. Now I got different browns, you know. And my son is black and white. I have a son that's black and white. I have a daughter that's black and Indian. All right, and now I got all these browns. I thought I was kind of equalizing the playing field. I'm being honest. I'm being honest, because I hated all the hate. And now I got these browns. What the hell is the browns? And I still want to know, and I don't know.
Well, that's a part of what Don was talking about, compartmentalizing, trying to organize it, and then you come out, it's not true. Okay? You put it like this, most recent. For those of us who are old enough, who in the hell are the Washington Commanders? Because for so long, they were the Redskins. Now, who were the red people?
Native American.
The Native Americans, okay? So again, language is fluid. You know,
See, you still ain't getting answered. You still ain't answering.
what difference does it make? Do you really care?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Well, why do you care how someone else defines you as long it's your level of consciousness?
Oh, baby, I know I am somebody, but that's not the point. The point is, now how do I tell y'all who I am? See, I know who I am. But if we try to do this on equal playing field, you know, I don't call you and say, you're fairer than that person. You feel me? What if you would call moments of fairness? Fair one, fair two, then white, then blanco. I mean, you know, that's what it sounds like to me. Now, I done went from the paper bag color that they used to pair us up with, now to the cocoa color, now to what? Peaches and cream, like that song. You know, but this is, how do I explain this to my grandchildren? You see what I'm saying? Everything isn't so lackadaisy just because it's not a part of what you go through. With me, this has just screwed me up a little bit. Does somebody tell me what they tell y'all we are before y'all get here? And then maybe I'll understand where it's coming from.
But then again, now, okay, let's flip it. Okay. I've had these experiences shared with me. let's say, a white person had a very intimidating, threatening, and even violent with a black person. Then you know what happens? They may paint a broad brush. All, don't, like the lady told, like you heard the lady say, hey, don't buy that because that's what niggas eat, okay? They could say, hey, look, don't stay away from them because of what that particular experience had been. So, you know, again, it's your, I would say, level of consciousness, but now the young people are saying you have to be mindful. You're mindful.
If I could, I would like to check in with a couple of our other participants just to see if they had something to add. Jim, would you like a moment to add anything?
Maybe I ask a question.
Speak a little bit louder, Jim. Okay.
Maybe I'll ask a question. When you get home, I'm asking, I'm putting something in. When you get home and you describe to someone else the participants here, how do you identify the participants? Do you say, oh, this black young lady said this? Or do you say, I heard one particular participant say something? That's the issue, I think. I think it's the way we present ourselves and the way we speak. Tom Brady, who calls Tom Brady white Tom Brady? But black quarterbacks, they, by name, they'll put black in front of quarterback, that person's name. That's the problem. We need to stop putting that description. We need to look at a person and speak to them as if they're a person. And that's it. They're a person. When I walk into a room, I don't go looking around, this is a white person, how do I speak to that person? Or there's a black person. I walk in the room and I speak to the person. I don't care what nationality or race, and I just speak to them. Putting that label in front puts me at a disadvantage.
Well, and puts a barrier.
Yeah.
It's a barrier too, right?
When you
Yeah.
do that,
Yeah.
that's the problem we have in this country. We want to put that label on people before we even know who they are, what they're all about.
Are you saying it's also like a bit dehumanizing?
Well, the issue is, to me, as a communicator, it creates problems for me as a communicator. Because now I have to think, now how do I approach this person? I don't want to do that. I want to approach you as a person. I don't care who you are, what race you are, male or female. I want to approach you as a person. And that's it. That's simple. If I have to go into the room, I have to say, oh, there's going to be a Jewish person here. How do I go in there and talk to this Jewish person? If I have to go in there and say, I have a black person, how do I? No. You walk in and you talk to the person as if they're a person. And you treat that person the same as you do everybody else. If you do that, life's simple. For me, life is simple because I try to make sure I keep things simple, like making a department, keeping my brain nice and simple and sweet. Because I don't want to get confused with all these other external issues that I have no control over. You know?
I've had an idea just because I want to respect our space we have, but we have a little bit of a time limit. But I'm wondering if we could enact that a little bit. I'm wondering if we can take a moment to sort of conclude this portion. I would love if we could all go introduce ourselves to somebody that you haven't met, that you maybe met here, that you heard here, but someone that you did not come with, and just let's introduce ourselves to this community, maybe a little bit as people. What do you think about that? Okay, it's a nice transition into mingling and eating the rest of these cookies and chips and things.
Because we could stay here until
We could
Tuesday
have and still not
talking
have
about
answers
this,
for
right?
all of these
Exactly.
complicated questions. I would like for us to transition this conversation to how do we keep this going? How do we actually introduce each other to one another as people?
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming and let's all